Let's talk some Seahawks. Rob Staton, SeahawksDraftBlog.com, brought to you by Superior Linen Service, family owned and operated since 1926. Superior Linen Service committed to delivering the highest quality products and services to the greater Puget Sound area. Get your free quote today, suplinen.com. Give them a call, 253-383-2636. Rob's with us. We're going to talk Klint Kubiak, why he likes him. Was he their first choice? Senior Bowl thoughts, and what is the most pressing need for your Seahawks next? You can follow Rob on social media there at Rob Staton. Also on YouTube, Rob Staton Football. And, of course, read all of his work at SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Jim wanted me to pass you a note to say that he likes the Kubiak hire because of the zone blocking scheme.
Okay.
Do you think Jim understands what a zone blocking scheme is?
I don't think many people do who are not in the game. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? That's been quite interesting actually following this Senior Bowl for the last few days. I don't think people realize that when an interior offensive lineman gets shoved 5 yards back into the quarterback, that the fact that he didn't disengage while doing it doesn't mean that it's a win. So, with the zone blocking stuff, no, I think people have a kind of like a rudimental idea of what it is. But that's perhaps one for the coaches out there.
One for the coaches to, and all the all 22 bros to all break it down, which we're not.
They're having a good week, aren't they?
Which we're not going to do. I just all 22 guy just drives me nuts. All right, Klint Kubiak, you wrote about it, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. You like the hire. Tell us why.
I think because he has a degree of experience. He's worked for a defensive-minded head coach in the past. He has actually called plays. I think he's had a degree of success. I don't think you can hold him responsible for what went wrong in the New Orleans situation, simply because of all of the injuries that they had. He has contacts in the league, so you would imagine they're in the process of building a staff now. And I just think for me, it's the surest thing. It gives you the best chance of this sort of just being competent and functioning and working, and that's really where the Seahawks needed to go. I think Hank Fraley, obviously there was some appeal there because of the work that he'd done with Detroit's offensive line, but he's never called plays. They were going to have to put somebody on his right shoulder telling him what to do in the passing game. I wasn't a huge fan of that. I was intrigued by a 28-year-old offensive coordinator, but is that really the direction you want to go when you've just fired your last offensive coordinator after 1 year? I think this gives them a chance to have, like I say, a functioning offense. And maybe he was the guy they always wanted, Puck. I mean, there's been a little whisper, a word on the street, stuff like that, that really the delay in this was the fact that he was still waiting to see what was happening in New Orleans. Because he was settled there. He's on the record saying he enjoyed living there and he was close to the family base in Houston. So I think they were maybe just seeing what was happening there first, and they've still not appointed a head coach.
Yeah, maybe it was that. Maybe he was holding out for that opportunity. It seems to me, just, I don't know, outside looking in and just basing it off what, Garofalo had told me 12, 13 days ago when he said and had the report that he was in the driver's seat. It felt like this was the guy all along, but they, probably to your point, waiting on to see if he were to get the Saints job. I think with Hank Fraley, I don't think they ever offered him the offensive coordinator job. I think they offered him a role to be like a run game coordinator and to maybe split the duties, because I can't possibly fathom that they offered him the offensive coordinator job and then he turns it down to remain in Detroit to be what? He didn't even get a promotion, really.
Yeah,
I did.
I don't agree with that, just because I think the big thing with him apparently was that he has 5 kids and several dogs, and they are very, very settled in Detroit. And the fact that his wife was the one who kind of broke the news suggests that maybe the family side of things was a big deal for him. And she even mentioned in her initial thing that we were never going to go to Chicago. It was always going to be Detroit. So I'm not sure that they ever offered him the job, but I think that they probably had talks, and as they were waiting for Kubiak, it was kind of left in the air, go and have a think about it. What do you want to do? And then he's decided to become the run game coordinator. And that's a better fit for him. It's a better fit for him because he's not called plays. He gets to still work in Detroit. And in a year's time, if things go well for the Lions, he will have other opportunities in the future, I'm sure, to be an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think we're agreeing to the same thing. I think that the job here was to probably partner with Kubiak. I don't think he was going to be the offensive coordinator. I don't know. I'm not. If he turned down a job to be an offensive coordinator, to remain in Detroit because of his family, to be a run game coordinator, that's just that's idiotic.
No, I really I'm going to disagree. So, as someone who
that's a job, that's a promotion. Yeah. He didn't even get a promotion. Okay, he got a minor promotion. That's career suicide. Like what? It's not like you're going to a bad offense.
I took a job, a promotion, which required me to commute for an hour and a half to the office and then an hour and a half back. And about 3 weeks into it, I thought, what have I done? I got a young family. I was never seeing them. It was messing with my life. And I ended up resigning and saying no. And it was a huge decision to do that. Like, this was going to set my career back potentially by doing that. But at the end of the day, I had to do it. I had to just go in a different direction for the sake of my family. And as it happened, I ended up taking a job that was a lesser job when I left there to be closer to home. And in the end, it all worked out. You know, I just started on a different path, quickly climbed the ladder again, and there we were. So when I think of it, I think, look, he has now got the security of staying in Detroit as long as he wants until another job comes along. Seattle is obviously a long way away from his roots in that part of America. And it's a good place to work. Like, if they continue to succeed in Detroit, his stock's not going to go. It's not going to go down. So I don't think he needs to take the first defensive coordinator job that was an offer. And I'm not sure it was a particularly attractive job. I don't think they offered him the job, by the way. I think they just sort of let it lie out there and have a think about it. Everyone sort of take a step back. But I think potentially Kubiak was the guy. They were waiting on the Saints. Fraley was in the mix if Kubiak didn't take it, but ultimately he's decided to stay in Detroit. And I think that's fair enough for him.
What do you think it looks like? It's hard, like with Kubiak. I mean, he's got history of calling plays. You know, the very one successful year in Minnesota calling plays. He comes from, there's a lot to like because of the tree he comes from with the Shanahans and working with that, you know, how close that obviously his father was to that system now that you see sprinkled all across football. Very successful season in Minnesota. You know, this year with New Orleans, Rob, it's hard to tell, right? Because, you know, it's 2 games where they had really the full complement of his offense, and then they just suffered injuries left and right. So it's hard to really gauge what they did this year. Alvin Kamara had a very good season, but I wonder, you know, rushing wise, was it because of his system that he ran, or was it because they had to lean on Alvin Kamara because of all the injuries they had to the quarterbacks? Because remember, Carr gets knocked out, and then they're dealing with, you know, Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener. So it's kind of hard. How would you evaluate how he called and what their offense with the Saints look like this year?
I think there's sort of positives and negatives. So Derek Carr had one of it. I mean, as someone who thought Derek Carr was essentially finished, he had a better season than he's had in a long, long time. So that's a positive. The way that he has taught Carr, that is, about the system. I was reading this article in The Athletic this week about the way that Kubiak puts the responsibility on the offensive line, in particular the center, to work protections, means it takes that responsibility off the quarterback's shoulders and frees him up a little bit. And Carr was saying that he really liked that idea. Mm-hmm. So that might be something that the Seahawks do. It's why I think maybe center position is going to be, you know, maybe of newfound importance for them in this offseason, because if that's the person calling the protections, then they may well go and target somebody who can handle that role, who's got a bit of experience behind them, perhaps even in this scheme.
Are we allowed to have a good center on the offensive line, Rob? Is that allowed?
Apparently it is allowed in some cities, but I don't know if there's a rule in Washington State which means you can't do it. But
there could be a separate tax or something.
but that's a good thing, you know, that Derek Carr play well. I think it's a good thing that the run game there. The biggest problem is it got to sort of, halfway through the season, and like Spencer Rattler as a rookie was having to play with a shell of an offense. Their best receiver was injured, then their second best receiver was injured, and you just couldn't function at all. Jake Hayne has struggled, so there's a bit of an unknown there. But I'm intrigued by it. He was being hailed as the next great young offensive mind after 2 weeks. People were writing articles saying he's going to be a head coach candidate in the offseason. So let's see how he gets on in Seattle.
I guess I don't know if this is a concern for you or for others. I just think the word out of New Orleans is, when you, and I don't know if he'll do a press conference. Like, he's not going to wow you in a press conference. No. And he's not going to wow you in an interview. And those who have covered him in New Orleans will say, he just doesn't look
boring.
Like he's boring, and he doesn't come across as a head coach in waiting. And you kind of, when you get these offensive minds, you kind of want him to be like, or any coordinator really, whether it's a defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator, to be like the guy like, hey, we hope he's here for a few years, well, longer, but has great success, and then boom, he's going to be a coach, someplace in the NFL. You don't really hear that with him. And I guess, I don't know if that's a red flag necessarily for people. It's not for me, just because I think that there are plenty of coaches in all of sports that can be better assistants and assistant coaches and number two guys than rather than be the number one guy. And that's okay. Steve Spagnuolo, to me, is a perfect example. I think he's a great number two guy. I don't know if he'd be a great number one.
Yeah, I'm not that worried about it. Every time I've listened to him speak, I just think he sounds a lot like Kyle Shanahan, and he's not a great listen either. So
no, that's true.
I think that, and look, Gary Kubiak was not exactly Mr. Charisma. So and he won a Super Bowl with with the last remnants of Peyton Manning's career. They managed to get a Super Bowl out of him. So when they couldn't
have the Cam Newton, but okay.
Yeah, and I mean, Peyton Manning could barely throw a forward pass. Brock Osweiler was starting some of those guys. So, it doesn't worry me. Like, I think he's one of these people who has worked with a lot of good coaches. He's worked with Kevin Stefanski. He's worked with North Turner. He's worked with Kyle Shanahan. He's obviously got his dad. He's been around some of the best defensive minds of the last generation or two. So, I'm very content that he's in Seattle, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I think on paper I'm excited about it, but like with anything, right? We all should just reserve the final opinion until we actually see it, and that's fair. I mean, I think that's you just got to see what it looks like. I mean, he could come in here and a year from now, you and Rob, you and I are doing this, and we're talking about the same issues. Why can't we?
Could be.
They're not doing this. They're not doing that. What happened to the offense? But we'll wait and see. And he definitely seems. I think we all can agree on this. His background, the way he wants to attack a defense, definitely fits more in line with McDonald's vision.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're the same age. I do. That was the one thing actually listening to him is I thought that they seemed like kindred spirits. I mean, they say the same things. We're gonna have some fundamentals on the offense, but it's going to be fitted to the players that we actually have. It's pretty much exactly the same thing, word for word, that Mike McDonald said when he took the head coaching job. So, I think that they seemed quite similar. Look, Mike McDonald's not exactly the most interesting listen, to be fair. So they're probably two peas in a pod here. Yeah. I think the big thing obviously is what are they going to do now? The first domino to fall is going to be Geno Smith's contract, and whether they resolve that with a compromise extension, or are they going to move on? I think the fact that Pete Carroll has popped up in Las Vegas makes that aspect of potentially Geno Smith playing somewhere else a little bit more intriguing than it would have been otherwise. Mm-hmm. Then you have the question mark of the offensive line. I have to say, I've been sat. I got home from work at 11 o'clock at night. Last night I was broadcasting on a soccer game, and I stayed up till 4 a.m. to watch the Senior Bowl rerun on the NFL Network and write a 3,000-word article. And
you're a sick man.
It's a very sad man. And as I was going to bed, Puck, I got into bed, and I mean this is sad in itself. That as I'm getting into climbing in next to my a sleep wife at 4 a.m., my thought turns to what the Seahawks should probably do in the draft. And, as I'm sort of thinking about it, my thought was, and look, I'm just going to be honest here. I don't want them to fanny about, Puck. I don't want them to sort of, I've discussed this with a couple of people and kind of like gone, oh yeah, I can see where you're coming from there. And I'm seeing more and more people saying it. I wrote an article saying they should maybe go defense in the first round if it works out. Yeah, but basically what I'm here to say is forget all of that. Forget it. Like I've watched a day and a half of the Senior Bowl now. I was watching it before it came on here. Just go and get the best defensive lineman you can in the first round. Do not wait until round 2 or whatever and go, hey, we can move this tackle to guard instead. There's a couple of guards in the first round, pure guards, Tyler Booker and Donovan Jackson.
Is Donovan, where's Jackson from? I read Ohio State, because I was skimming it this morning. So who is the guy from like the school I think I've never heard of that you liked? Somebody from like Auburn A&M or Alabama?
Oh, Alabama A&M.
Yeah.
But he was he was very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing him again. His name is Carson Vinson.
That's right. Okay.
He's a left tackle though. I mean, he was awful against in the 2 games that I saw. He was not very good during the season, but he was very good yesterday in the Senior Bowl. But yeah, I think Tyler Booker or Donovan Jackson, you can just plug them in, and then you don't have to. Like, I don't want to finesse this thing. I don't want to think, oh, well, there may be a little bit more value if you go and take a tackle and you can move him around and stuff like this at 50. Like I don't want to do that. I don't want to go after what's left at 50.
And Jackson's Ohio
lineman.
Yeah, Jackson's Ohio State. Booker is where from?
Alabama.
Okay. Yeah, so those are 2 pretty good programs that have had success with producing linemen and players.
And they have, and people will say, well, Alabama's had a few busts, over the years.
Everybody does.
But Landon Dickerson's going to line up in the Super Bowl for the Eagles, and Ryan Kelly's had a good career. So you can't judge that. I mean, like if you would never draft Josh Allen if you said, well, when's the last great Wyoming quarterback?
Exactly. 100%. Yeah.
Texas Tech is not exactly a quarterback, factory, is it? But they've produced Patrick Mahomes, who might be the best one ever.
Yeah.
So, I think that's what I would do, Puck. It's go and get the best defensive lineman with that.
Seemed like it's a good class for that. Also a good class for D tackles. That's what I read, at least. The people who I trust, what I read is that. So those are. I mean, it's good. I mean,
it's fine. It's fine.
Fine. I don't like fine. I thought I read it was better than fine.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's fine. Like there's, Mason Graham's going to go early. Walter Nolan's going to go early. TJ Sanders will go at some point in the top 50. And then, you then get into sort of how high is Kenneth Grant going to go at Michigan? But his tape was underwhelming. Derek Harmon has mixed views on him, very productive at Oregon, but what is he? Mm-hmm. You got Tyreek Williams, got 31-inch arms, good run defender at Ohio State. Ty Robinson's doing okay at the Senior Bowl. Riley Mills has been injured. Alfred Collins is all right. I mean, there's numbers there, but there's not 5 players that you think, in 10 years we're going to have said, wow, what a D tackle class.
Do you go? Let me. I'm going to ask you about the quarterbacks. Is there, because they're not going to do one early, but maybe they go. Maybe this is the year they finally draft one late, and maybe there's a sleeper in there someplace that Kubiak and these guys have their eyes on. Do you think with the hiring of Kubiak? I mean, again, Cousins had a great season with him.
Yeah.
If somehow Cousins becomes, I don't know, like how he would become available, and really with his cost, it's probably going to make it.
Oh, he'll be available.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
He's Russell Wilson this year.
So Cousins is out there potentially. Darnold would still be, and he worked with Darnold where, in San Francisco?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Darnold is out there. Do you think there's a chance that they pivot off of Geno Smith at all?
Yes.
Okay.
I think there is a chance. I think Kirk Cousins will end up in Cleveland. Cleveland needs a cheap quarterback. Kevin Stefanski's had 2 years with Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, and they had some success. So I think Kirk Cousins on $1 million to Cleveland makes sense because they're still paying Deshaun Watson for 1 more year. It will enable them to have a cheap starter, veteran starter who can get them out of this season.
Jesus, if you get him for that, why wouldn't you take him here?
Well, that's the argument a lot of people are making. That you could, for that price, why not? And I think the only reason that people push back on it is because we can't have an adult conversation about quarterbacks in the Seahawks fan base. So
right about that.
So there's that. I mean, with Darnold, I think Darnold's very interesting because I think John Schneider will like Darnold. I think the history with Kubiak in San Francisco with Darnold helps. That might be more attractive for him to come here because of that history. It was always said that Pete Carroll liked Sam Darnold, so there's always a chance that they might go after him at Vegas. And then there's the Geno Smith angle. So I think that's what it's going to come down to. Are you in the Darnold sweepstakes? Is Cousins, do you want to consider that for a year as a cheap bridge instead? Can you get something done with Geno? And then there's the draft. And I can tell now, Puck, this is going to be a long 3 months for me because I'm going to keep saying this. People are now then going to associate me with this player. If he's terrible, I'm always going to get hammered for it. But the quarterback that I think John has had his eye on all along also happens to be a really good fit for this kind of offense that Kubiak runs. And that is Quinn Ewers. And I just wonder whether that second round pick, maybe they're going to take him there.
I can't give you like some X's and O's reason why I don't care for him. All right. And you're going to throw out his release and his vision and all this to me. There's just something about him that I don't see a winner. I just don't see a guy that a game's on the line. I trust him to come through because I don't think he ever does. I don't think he ever wins it. And he's had so much talent around him. Their roster is loaded. And there's just times in big games that he just looked, I don't know. He just looked underwhelming to me. And he just doesn't look like, I guess the best way I could describe it, and I can't really quantify this with anything, is I just think he lacks the it factor.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the lack of the it factor. I mean, the problems for me are the injury record is bad. The inconsistent play has been an issue for him. He can look great and has looked great in games, but then it doesn't he's not had a great season, if that makes sense. Not had a complete season. What I would say, though, is he played really injured with a bad ankle and a bad abdomen for half of the season. And before he got the injuries, he was looking like a top 10 pick. He was brilliant at Michigan in that game, and he was on it. And then as soon as he came back from the injury, he'd lost all torque. He looked hesitant. His arm strength, his deep ball had completely gone. I just think he played hurt. Now, has he got the clutch gene? I mean, look, certainly he didn't beat Washington when they had a chance last year, and he didn't beat Ohio State this year. What I would say is that he had one of the best wins we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years when Texas, and he beat Alabama in their own backyard when, Saban's Alabama, when they were good. And it was a great performance. And he won them the game, essentially. And then the other thing I would say is that they needed to convert 4th and 13 at the end of the Arizona State game. And he scores a touchdown with that throw and then wins the game in overtime with his arm. So he has had moments like that. And the release is good. And he has got something about him. The size isn't great. So he is going to be one of the most divisive people. Like he could go second round. He could go 5th round. Some people will like him. Some people will detest him as a quarterback. I've just got this feeling that maybe John sees something because, again, I'm sorry to bring this up again, but back in the day, he received a perfect recruiting grade. And there's only people like Jadeveon Clowney who's had that in the past. The talent, the expectation with him has been that he was going to be like a Trevor Lawrence type player. Yeah. And that will stick in the mind of some evaluators.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, he was, I remember his recruiting. I remember, how big he was to go to Ohio State. And I remember just the hype around it, and then ended up staying there for, was it a year, and then ends up transferring, or maybe only a semester, and then ends up transferring to Texas. All right. It's going to be intriguing. You're for sure. And will this finally be the year that they spend some draft capital there on a quarterback? They keep saying it every year, Rob, and then they never do it.
It's going to happen. Like, this is the thing I think the intention's there every year.
Yeah.
It's about the opportunity. And it's not a great quarterback class, but he is maybe, there's probably like 1 or 2 quarterbacks that I can see it. And he is one that I can see it with.
Who do you think the first one is off the board? Who do you think it is? You think it's Cam?
It's going to be Cam Ward. Like, I've got a second round grade on Cam Ward, and the reality on Cam Ward was he didn't even get a Senior Bowl invite last year, and people were grading him in the 5th and 6th round, which was fair. And I've seen him live. You've seen it. You probably saw every game he played for Washington State. He was not a top 10 pick in the slightest. Now, he played well for Miami. I mean, look, the ACC has become the Big 12. I'd fancy myself to throw for 100 yards in a game. Like, it's so bad. and look, he did very, very well under no real pressure. And he had a loaded team, the tight end, Restrepo. It was easy for him. But he's going to go early. I think he will be the one quarterback goes here. I tell you who I don't think is going to go early, and that's Shedeur. I don't think he's going to go. I don't think he's going to go in the top 10. I think he's going to.
Well, see, it's interesting. I don't know anything because I didn't think Jaden Daniels was going to be good. Jaden Daniels
pretty good.
Has been pretty good. It's weird when it comes down to the quarterbacks. I don't know with Cam. I mean, Cam's going to make some throws that are just going to wow you. And you're like, oh my God, like, I don't know how many guys can make that throw. And then he's just going to make some decisions where you're just an absolute head scratcher. He had one in Miami last year, and game they ended up winning where they should have lost. Like, I'm trying to blank it late in the season. Where he throws it just, back across his body, back across
every game.
And you're like, what are you doing? The guy that just this year, and I've said this before, and I'll cite the game again, and I think he's a very polarizing figure is Shedeur Sanders. I remember watching the Kansas State game. Kansas State's a good football team. He lost every one of his receivers that game. Everybody gets knocked out. And he is getting the shit kicked out of him.
Yep.
I mean, he is getting blindsided. His offensive line can't block. That kid stood in there, took every shot, and delivered every ball. And they ended up losing the game, but it was a close game. And I was under the impression, like, he seems spoiled. I wouldn't want to take him. But man, I just came away from watching that game, just sitting on my couch going, man, that's a kid that plays hard and plays tough and had a lot of adversity against him. And
he's got some balls. I think the problem is how much the teams, like, he's not physically amazing. He doesn't have the traits and the size. He does get himself into trouble. He's the kind of player that will dance around in the pocket for 7 seconds, take a horrendous sack, and then on 3rd and 30, he'll convert. Like, that's kind of how he is. And then you've got to deal with the dad press conference every week. So the dad's going to be there. It's Colorado's weekly press conference. Hey, how do you think your son's getting on Prime? And you're going to have to deal with that. So that's going to be the problem. And with Cam, like you said it, the number of times in games where he fades backwards for absolutely no reason when there's just make the simple read and throw the ball, and he's hanging in the pocket, he drifts backwards, all of a sudden he's having to run away from 3 players, and then he'll throw across his body, or he'll try and throw it out of bounds, and it's an intentional grounding, and he can't do those things. And that's the problem with him, is that when you get to the NFL, you have to be quicker, you have to be precise, you have to be, checking down reads. You can't play backyard football, and Cam Ward just plays backyard football. There will be the team that drafts Cam Ward, and I bet it's the New York Giants, will probably have a 2nd round grade on him, and will take him 3rd overall.
Yeah, I've liked him personally though. He's just the way he interacts with fans and kids.
Yeah,
I'll have a little special place, at least for me. For him. All right, Rob, you're the best. Thanks for always doing it every single week. Go check out Rob's work, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Again, he stayed up till 4 a.m. He's got a 3,000-word piece on the Senior Bowl. Go check it out. He's got thoughts on Klint Kubiak, why he likes it. There's that. He's also got videos up at Rob Staton Football on YouTube, live shows with everybody, and he's nonstop work, this guy, and we're happy to have him every single week. Brought to you by Superior Linen Service. All right, Rob, catch some sleep, and we'll talk to you next week.
Awesome. See you next week.
There he is, Rob Staton. Again, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. He is a machine of how much work he puts in every single day, and just glad that we get a small piece of them every single week. Big thanks to Superior Linen Service, family owned and operated since 1926. Give them a call. 253-383-2636. Visit them at suplinen.com. Again, you can follow Rob on all the social media platforms. on Twitter at Rob Staton, and also on YouTube. Just search Rob Staton. Rob Staton football, I should say, because he's great, man. He's great at what he does, and he's a fabulous addition here there to Puck Sports.